Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fintech Fun Talks. For those of you that are new, we are a Copper Canvas Ads agency, and we help fintechs grow their revenue within a 12-month period by acquiring new clients. Today, we have an exciting guest, Bill Tull, the founder of Fintech Connects. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're
Look
so glad
forward
to
to,
have you.
look forward to being part of this conversation and taking it to the fintech community.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Bill, tell us a little bit about your history and where you are today.
Yeah, history wise, I've been in payments for the past 20 years. I always refer to myself, and if people meet me, they're kind of shocked as a 260-pound unicorn because I understand both sides of payments. So from a treasury perspective and from a merchant perspective, very few
Mm.
people in this ecosystem understand both. So a lot of times when I'm talking to buyers, I know kind of some of their pain points that they're dealing with from a treasury side and from a technology side. So I've been able to have calls with Apple without a solution architect and kind of understand the way the confluence and the payment flows. Spent many years at JP Morgan, where I had relationships with GM, Ford, Chrysler, all your big automotives. I sit outside of Detroit. And then the last 10 plus years, I've been more on the fintech side of the house. So if you think of subscription, recurring payments, that's what I've done. A few years ago, I decided to start my own company called Fintech Connects to help companies scale from a differentiated standpoint, separate themselves in the market.
Which can be hard to do because it is a very big industry and it can be a noisy industry too.
Absolutely. I think the biggest problem today within the fintech ecosystem is a lot of people are competing for a little bit of space.
Exactly.
So where do they bring value? And then is that value going to bring longevity?
Mm-hmm.
Because if the value only solves a need for today, they're going to work with somebody else
Right.
that can help them sustaining, extending value.
And so what you're doing is really helping them stand out. From a treasury and merchant standpoint, what do you think are the most misunderstood risks or inefficiencies companies face today?
I'll walk down the path of the treasury piece
Yeah.
first. Normally, people have, let's say, if they're with an incumbent and
Mm-hmm.
someone's trying to pitch them to move their business over to them, there's typically two reasons people don't do that. One is they do not have the IT resources. That's usually the first reason. And the second reason is from a reconciliation process. If you can't reconcile the files or the funds or what have you, it don't matter how much I could speed up the timing or how much I could help with your, minimizing friction. If it's just too convoluted and too busy, it doesn't help, right? So you got to be
Yeah.
able to solve those two things. On the merchant side, same thing, same those two same challenges, but you have a number of different players. You have a lot of resellers, which are called ISVs. You may have what's called an
Mm-hmm.
ISO, independent sales organization, and you got many of these big companies that are reselling their services and they're extending it down to other people. So if you got like a Verizon or a T-Mobile, they're going to do business with these big corporations that are well known. And then you may have someone who focus more on mid-market or S&B, what have you.
Yeah, that's interesting. How do you balance the needs of merchants with the broader financial strategies of the organization?
The biggest piece is providing value today, tomorrow, and differentiating yourself. So many people within the payment ecosystem are competing for the same business, but
Mm-hmm.
people do business with people, one, who they trust, and two, who they like, right? So if you can build that rapport and be in the different rooms with some of these folks to help them, is going to help. A client will tell you everything you need to know. I think you got to ask them. I think one of the proverbial challenges that people face, will always start a pitch deck with, this is us, this is what we do so
Yeah.
much more. No one cares because they heard the same story from the last 9 people. So one of the things I've always told my team and people I work with and advise on, put that at the back of the deck. If you want to use the deck, put that at the back because they heard the same story. Let's talk about your business, right? I want to have a conversation with someone.
I like that you pointed out a couple of things that people can do to build great rapport and relationships with the people that they're working with, because not everybody comes by that naturally. And so to have tips like that is helpful. If you have any additional tips that you'd like to add, would love to hear them.
It all starts with the rapport, from the
Mm-hmm.
fact finding to the initial conversation. Let's say if you pick up the phone and you try to talk to someone, you literally probably have 15, 20 seconds, right? To kind of gauge their conversation. And then going back to the people who you sit down and talk with, you may have someone they want to talk about the game last night, Or you may have someone they want to talk, if they got a bunch of pictures in their house, in their office, and they want to talk about their kids or their grandkids. And then you're going to have the person who may have been there 30, 35 years. They could care less. They just want to get out the door, give me the number, and let's go. So you have to be a chameleon and be able to adapt. And that's one thing that's served me well throughout my career. And then transparency and integrity. Those are two of the biggest things in life, but business as well, because if I can't trust you, I'm not doing business.
The companies that are transparent, you may come across an issue or a problem that might make them leave in other circumstances, but you have a relationship of trust built. They're more willing to work through that with you and move forward because of that transparency. Are there specific innovations in Treasury or payments that are exciting you the most right now?
I would say, obviously, RTP, real-time payments, you have stable coins. I think with your devices, right? So competing for space on your phone. Everyone's competing for space within the digital wallet because they want to bring everything to the user. So how do I bring it to you with the least amount of friction? So think about this, for example. I have, Apple Pay, and if I'm shopping late at night, and if I don't have my wallet on me and they don't offer Apple Pay, I abandon the cart every time because it's not easy. It's not user friendly. People want convenience and people pay for convenience.
Yeah. When I'm out there as a consumer, those things are what I'm looking for. It makes me think when you mentioned Apple Pay, having worked in the payments industry myself for quite some time, I remember the era where everyone was trying to create a version of a pay product. And then it has kind of filtered down and the dust has settled where we've got a few big ones.
A lot of people are going to try to continue to follow what Apple and Amazon and those folks are doing, but the big will just continue to get bigger.
There is always room for that innovation and disruption of the industry. I think that people in this industry are always excited for the next thing technology-wise. What's your approach to innovation when it comes to building scalable financial products?
The big approach is ROI. How quick can we monetize a product?
Right.
How can we take it to market? What's the addressable market look like? Accessibility, scalability, reliability, and vulnerability. So if you think of those pieces, is this going to matter in a year? Is this going to matter in 2 years? And what's the market we could go attack today? When I was at Ingenico/Worldline, we had basically a link to pay that was very prevalent in the hospitality space. However, with that link, it only worked our payment realms.
Yeah.
We didn't have agreements with other companies where we could use their realms and do a revenue share. I know a lot of times when we would look to take that to go to market and try to win some business, that was one of the pitfalls that we had because they're like, hey, we would love to use it. By the way, can I use this backend platform? We're like, no, you got to use us. Well, that's not always easy to move your whole payment flow because some people may have lines of credit tied to that. They may have different loans, different things that are tied to that where they have to keep that business with X company.
How do you prioritize between optimizing the current products that you have and launching new ones, especially while you're scaling? Like it's a lot to juggle. So do you have a strategy around that?
I would say with prioritization, it goes back to, customers' needs, right? If you look at your current customers that you have, what do they need? What do they need tomorrow? And then if you have a prospect that's big enough, I think you have to be nimble and flexible to be able to work with that prospect to build something that's going to craft or fit their needs.
When you talk about making sure it's what the customers want, what's your best way of collecting that information?
Simple. Ask. I think a lot of people are afraid to ask because they don't want to look like on their end that they don't know what they're doing. So let's say if I'm talking to a prospect or a customer, I'm going to ask the question, not because I don't know the answer, but I don't know what you're thinking. I don't know what your go-to-market is. I don't know what your roadmap looks like. I don't know what your EBITDA looks like. I don't know any of these things. So if I start asking the question and I try to help solve that need, that's where you provide the value.
Yeah, it goes back to that communication and building relationships that we were talking about earlier. Sometimes it is a phone call. There's just something about talking to a person face to face, so to speak, even if it's the phone and you're not seeing them, but you're talking, that really helps you to get to the point a lot faster, understand where they're coming from, and build those relationships.
If I can't do something, I will tell you. If I think it's going to be a challenge, I will tell you. We will never get to the ninth inning and I call you and I say, hey, Christy, guess what? There's 2 outs. I don't know what happened, but, everything's hit the fan and we can't do the deal. No, I'm going to keep you engaged and informed throughout the process. I would much rather over communicate than under communicate.
Nobody wants to be in that position where you are in the final inning and everything's falling apart. Nobody wins in that scenario. So setting yourself up for success and just being honest about what you can and cannot do absolutely puts you in the best position. I'm wondering if you can walk us through a time when you had to pivot a product strategy due to market changes or internal insights.
Yeah, I had a customer years ago when I was at a company, and they did bank transfers. Mm-hmm. So think of the student education process. Let's say if I have a student sitting in Pittsburgh, but they're from China. So you have a foreign student and you have to pay from an international standpoint. So how do I pay with foreign exchange and currencies and what have you? This company that we were working with was moving about $3 billion a year through this. And we told them we could solve the gaps in 150 different countries. Well, they did not update the roadmap. So it ended up going from 30 companies all the way down to 10. Obviously, the customer was not happy. We spent going through this solution. And they even engaged with our CEO and they said, listen, I know it's not Bill's fault. It's unfortunate you guys don't have the roadmap updated. What can we do? So we kind of made concessions within where we could support them and tried to work with them to grow exponentially as we recover in those markets.
Wow, that is an interesting story and one that I think that a lot of our listeners can probably relate to. You know, things do shift without a lot of insight or time in advance of us knowing that this is going to happen. And it sounds like you handled that in a great way.
Yeah, and I think things are going to happen no matter like life, right? So I do a lot of coaching within sports and youth sports and business, and you can control two things, your attitude and effort. You can't necessarily control everything else. So how you respond to something is really going to dictate a lot.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. You have a lot of experience with partnerships. So I want to pick your brain about that a little bit. What makes a strategic partnership truly valuable to you? And do you have any red flags that you look out for when going into a partnership?
The number one thing within a partnership is it mutually beneficial. I know a lot of people. So from a partner standpoint, so I put myself in the networking space. So a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, can you connect me to this person? Or could you connect me to that person? And you know, if I spent 5-6 years building relationships and I don't feel comfortable, I'm not going to connect you because it's a reflection of me.
Yeah.
And then going back to the partnership piece, you know, is it a win-win? I think too many times people put all these partnerships on paper. They're excited and they're announcing, hey, we have a partnership with XYZ. But what's coming from it? Is any revenue coming from it? You know, I can think of a company I was at where we tried to do some stuff inside of a digital wallet they had. And there was another company we were working with. They wanted to further innovate inside that wallet. And they were paying, we would have had to pay them to do a few additional things. And we were going to get their payments business. And they were doing 41 billion payments a year, massive deal.
Wow.
And I said, listen, all we got to do is cut a check for X, a couple $100,000. And we're going to, get probably $40-50 million a year in revenue. And the C-level executives could not see past that. They said, well, we'll take their payment business, but we won't give them that. Landed for you. How is that a partnership? That's really not mutually beneficial, right?
Right.
I think sometimes people try to overcomplicate things, right? And I've worked at big corporations where they want to have the bigger stick and, hey, I get the bigger piece of the pie. And I think too many times people get in their own ways.
And I think it's easy to underestimate your own value in some of those ways. When you look at a company that's so big, you think, oh yeah, they are the big beast. They do deserve this. But no, you need to really understand your value and what you're offering and what that means in the industry and protect it. So
I look at my team, and anyone who's ever worked on my team knows that I'll do whatever it takes. If it's rolling up my sleeves or cleaning the toilet, whatever it takes. I got out there. I went to trade shows. I flew all around the world, right? I had time away from my own family, right? And I proverbially put in the work, right? I've done back-to-back red-eyes, spoke in Silicon Valley, different things, different events. But I think it goes back to be willing to roll up your sleeves and just put in the work.
And that a small outreach to someone when you're talking about networking really can go a long way and starts the foundation of building that network and those relationships. To me, it's less intimidating than people make it seem.
Oh, agreed. 100%. So I look at it, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. Sometimes people don't do their due diligence, right? They're not doing their research and what have you. If I got to get on a call and tell you everything there is about me or my company, that's a problem.
Mhm.
because it tells me you didn't do your homework.
Yeah. Yeah, we all have our different areas of expertise. And like you said earlier, it's not a one way street. It's a win win with both of you coming together when you have something that aligns.
Absolutely.
How do you evaluate potential partners in terms of cultural alignment, those intangibles, let's say, and your long term goals?
I would say the first thing is one, is it a true mutual partnership? Are we
Mhm.
just going to sign a piece of paper and nothing comes from it? If that's the case, it doesn't make any sense to do the deal. Two, does it solve a gap? We have a gap for customers and can we solve a need for them? Three, you always look at the ROI or what an integration or timeline looks like from an implementation standpoint. And I think the last thing is, can I see myself working with this person for longevity? Personality is a big thing when you have
Yeah.
partnerships. If you got sports teams or whatever, you can only have one quarterback, right? You got to work as a team. And I think in the payment ecosystem, a lot of us are quarterbacks.
I like that you mentioned the way that you treat them impacts your relationship. This is something that can be really difficult when a company is scaling fast. Do you have advice or input on how a company can maintain those things as they're growing?
I'd say two things. And these are two things I tell anyone who comes to work for me and on my team. First thing is walk in every room until you don't need an introduction.
Oh,
Reality
there you
is
go. Yeah.
each one of those rooms will change, so you'll always need to walk into them. I know a lot of people within payments, but they still change. So I still walk in all those rooms, introduce myself, get to know some people who I don't know, and obviously shake hands and catch up with some people who I do know. And two, I would say don't ever big time anyone. I think a lot of people forget where they came from. We're all trying to do what's right. We're trying to take care, of ourselves and feed our families and do what we need to do and do the right thing. And again, we're not
Yeah.
all going to get along. Everyone's going to have different personalities, but I can't tell you how many people, hundreds of people over the years that I've helped get a job, right? And my wife always says, "Well, you help a lot of people." And I'm like, if I was in their shoes, I would want this. I would want some help me.
Hmm.
So I kind of look at proverbially put myself in their shoes
Yeah.
and just doing what's right.
I can honestly say that I wouldn't be where I am in my career without people taking that kind of time when I was early in fintech when it didn't even have a name. They're having that attitude and being willing to share your expertise, the things that you have learned along the way. Such a great way to be able to pay back.
Well, I think the other thing is don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
So one of my best friends, his nephew was graduating college about 3, 4 years ago and graduated with a marketing degree. And he was looking for a job for about a while. And they're like, "Well, why don't we call
Hmm.
Bill?" I said, what are you looking to do? And I said, "Well, why don't you just come work for me on my team? You can learn a lot from me in payments. So why don't you come work on my team?" And he did. And he really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's
What is one cultural value that you will never compromise on, no matter how big the opportunity?
I would say from a cultural value is I will never cheat the deal. What I mean by that is I will never do something unethical, right? Within that deal. So I think too many times in salespeople tell the customer, "Hey, we can do everything." Well, if you
Yeah.
can't do it, you don't do the deal. And within payments and technology, that's a big piece. If you don't have an integration or you don't have the tech stack right built out,
Yeah.
I just think you need to be honest.
Yeah.
I
It
will
is
never
something
tell
that's
someone
so
we have
easy.
it. I will.
I've been in the shoes on the product side. I've actually been in both shoes. I've been in sales and then I've been on the product side too, where, something has been promised that we simply don't have and we don't have time on the roadmap for, or you have competing priorities. So, yeah, that's a really good one. And it shows a level of knowledge and understanding of the business as a whole and where you are and what your trajectory is as well. How do you embed culture into performance reviews, maybe hiring, and just everyday decisions?
I think the key is having a pulse on your business, having a pulse on your people. I've told people in the past when they go into management for the first time, I think you have to manage everyone the same, but manage everyone differently. So when
Mm-hmm.
someone first asked me that, they said, "Well, what do you mean?"
Yeah.
Well, someone, is going to be young. You're going to have different stages, people at different stages of their life, right? Different ages. What you may have the young lady who all she cares about is career growth. How do I get here? How do I get to the next step? And what is there for me to do? And then you may have
Mm-hmm.
someone who wants constant recognition, right? Like Jimmy did this and great job, Jimmy. And how do I manage them? And then you're going to have someone who they're motivated by money, right? Show me how
Mm-hmm.
to get the most money I can get. And then you're going to have someone who's motivated by time. What I mean by that is work-life balance. So
Yes.
I've met leaders in the past who lived the work, who would start their day 4 or 5 in the morning at Panera and then work all day to 7, 8 o'clock at night. And I think that ultimately it burns you out, right? Catch up to you. Um,
Yeah.
and I think too many times people burn the candle at both ends. I know I've done it many times, and I've had bosses tell me like, dude, you're going to wear yourself out. So you need to make sure you give yourself the break, and you got to make sure you give your people time. Different people will want to be managed differently as well,
Yeah.
right? How do you manage them?
It's great that you're able to not only understand that everyone has different motivators, but really try to look at each of them as that individual and understand those for each employee. It takes a lot of work. It takes some mental space and energy to be able to do that. But when you do take the time, you will have, and you can correct me if you feel differently, but my perspective is that you create an environment where people feel understood, where they feel like they're a part of a team and a culture and they want to work harder. That's been my experience in the past in managing people and playing to their strengths and being able to offer them the things that are most important to them. Let's talk about what KPIs are most critical for you when you're evaluating the health of a business.
The key is, do we have sustainable opportunities? How many opportunities are in the pipeline? I know there's some leaders, they look at how many calls their team makes every month or every day. I've never been that leader. I'm not a micromanager. I'm going to help you build your business and work with you to do what you need to do. But I believe some people can do more and less. What I mean by that is it may take Jimmy over here, 40 hours to create the same pipeline that Brandon creates in 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just different. Do we have sustainable opportunities? What is the action to close these items? How fast will they close? Size of the revenue? Do we have the resources? I look at a number of different things within that. So if I'm measuring something out, number of opportunities, what's short, near, long-term opportunities, what's the revenue look like? And what do we need to close the deal?
And I'm wondering if you track any non-traditional metrics that give you insight into performance or culture.
Well, I go back and I would look at like how many calls someone may have had in the last month or 2 months or what have you. And a lot of times if it's a big call, I'm involved in those, right?
Oh, right.
And I'll typically help drive that. So I always say behaviors equal results. So if people are doing the right behaviors, they'll get the results.
Yes. So you're just watching those behaviors and not worrying about the outcome because the behavior speaks to the outcome.
Absolutely. And I think if you have the right people in, you can help them get to that result. And then you can get to the proverbial coach them up or coach them out piece. That sometimes as well.
Final question for you. How do you ensure KPIs align across departments like finance, product, partnerships to drive toward the same goals?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, revenue dictates everything.
Okay.
Sales dictate everything, right? And what I mean by that is obviously each department is equally important, but if we don't have any sales, our doors aren't open.
Right.
Because it's not creating any revenue. So if I think of a hospital, so my wife's the CNO, the doctor of nursing, runs hospitals. Within the hospital, if they don't have patients that come in and do surgeries and different things, the lights don't stand. So how does that tie to finance? How does that tie to, anesthesia, what have you? And everything's got to be a cohesive unit altogether. No different than a payment, no different than a surgery. So if I'm going in for a surgery, you think of scheduling, post-op, pre-op, anesthesia, doctors, nurses. I mean, there's probably 12 different departments that touch that patient. Same thing in payments, right? If I'm moving money from point A to point B, is there a fraud tool? Is there encryption? Is there tokenization? Is there chargeback? Is there a gateway? Those pieces. And then scaling back to the broader business, if you will, as you talked about, you got sales, finance, product, operations, a number of different things. And how do we all flow together? But I think going back to the KPI is making sure you're syncing with those teams, making sure you're working together to provide that solution.
That's a really good point. First of all, I liked your analogy about the medical industry and what's required there. It's a really good parallel, but also staying connected with the different departments. I've had both experiences in my life, and it definitely makes such a big difference when I understand the whole picture and where my department fits in all of it. And then you can drive toward things together, toward the same goals.
But if you're disconnected, it will never work, right?
It's so hard. You're shooting in the dark. Yeah.
Yeah. You just don't know what the other person's thinking. You don't know what they're working with. You don't know their challenges. You don't know their gaps.
And a lot of things that you and I have talked about today, I've noticed are very intentional things. They are not things that you can't put these on autopilot. You have to be really intentional about understanding what motivates each employee. You have to be intentional about going into the meetings to make sure that everyone knows you, and also making sure that you're connecting with all of the different departments so that they understand their place in the ecosystem and the KPIs. That's a common theme that I have seen here, and I think that identifies you as a really great leader, in my opinion. So thank you so much for sharing all of these things.
I just always go back to, people will model themselves after the behaviors they see, right? So
Absolutely.
ultimately, I mean, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I do a lot of stuff motivational wise, posts, a lot of stuff sports wise, and I always end it with what they see, they become. And a lot of people have asked me, what does that mean? So if I sit on a couch all day long, at the end of my work day and I'm drinking a beer and I'm eating a pizza and I never do nothing with my kids and I'm not outside, what do you think is going to happen when my sons or my daughter grow up? They're going to think that's the norm, right?
Yeah.
So I've always tried to pour myself into my family and my kids and the kids that I coach. And, because I want I want my kids to be a better version of me.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the kids who I coach, I want them to be the best version of themselves. I think it all starts with your attitude and effort. And if you have the right attitude, you have the right effort, ultimately, we talked about behaviors and results. Those things will all come together. We're all going to have stuff that happens to us.
Yes.
Good, bad, or indifferent. So I just think how you look at it is, an overall underlying factor of how things work. I'm an avid weightlifter. I play a lot of sports, very active. And I've been dealing with a pinched nerve for the last year. Right? I'm between my C6 and C7. It's been brutal. I'm usually a dude who's lifting 400 or 500 pounds. And it was very humbling to the point where my 12-year-old son was out benching me on a bench where I couldn't do 135 for me because of the numbness. Like my arm, it just the nerve. I told myself I'd rather have it be me than my wife or kids. Right.
Yes.
Well, I think if you just look back at it, and you talked about the common theme with people and different things, just treat people the right way.
Yeah.
And everything else will take care of itself. I think we've lost that as a society, and we just don't treat people the right way.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Bill, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate the insights and the advice that you've been able to share with the viewers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
Of course, you too.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching our podcast today. I'm Kristen Nielsen. I'm the owner of Copper Canvas Ads Agency, and we partner with fintechs to help them scale their business within a 12-month period. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and I've seen how saturated the market can be, and therefore how difficult it can be to make your business stand out in a sea of other fintechs that may look similar or maybe even slightly different. But how do you make yours stand out? How do you get your message to the right people and those with high buying intent? That's what Copper Canvas Ads Agency is here to do. We are a growth partner, and we take a deep dive into your business to really understand what your strong points are, where there may be areas of weakness, and how we can fill those areas of weakness and create a plan to move forward in a strong way and really scale. So if you are interested, simply go to our website, coppercanvasadsagency.com, and schedule a time. There are buttons right there on the front page for you to book a time, and then we'll love to talk to you and see what we're able to do together.